Welcome back. We've begun the process of styling our design with CSS in the last video. And we're going to continue here setting up the design for these links right here. And if we bring up our finished project, you can see the way they're going to look. First difference obviously is that these are being displayed in line as opposed to stacked on top of one another. There's a line on the top and the bottom. We have a little hover effect going on these for the different colors. So we're going to go ahead and set this up. Now, if I go into the code for this, the HTML code, there is our top nav div. Now, I want you to really focus on the order that things are contained in one another. We have this entire link inside of a div called top nav. Inside of top nav, we have an unordered list. And inside of that unordered list, we have 5 links here, 5 LIs. And then there's a link inside of each one of those. So the order of precedence is top nav, UL, LI, A. That's the order of the tags. So we can use that to specify exactly what we want to do. And that's going to be important because if we were just to, let's say, format the list items, just format an LI, it would also affect these up here. If we were just to format the UL without specifying top nav, it would format these up here as well as these down here. So we need to specify exactly what we're trying to format with our CSS by calling out the ID and then the tags that are embedded into one another. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my style sheet here, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And I'll find my containers, and there's my top nav. And the only thing we've done so far is we've said to clear both of these, to clear both the float left and the float right that were associated with the logo and the social media icons div. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to create 3 additional rules. I'm going to go ahead and do top nav UL, so I can format that unordered list. I'm going to do top nav, and this time I'm going to do UL LI, and then just do a couple of brackets. Again, these are just empty styles so that I can get ready to put things inside of them. And then I'm going to do top nav UL LI A. So you can see how we're using these selectors to specifically target an element in our design. This is going to specifically target an unordered list in the top nav. This is going to specifically target the list items in an unordered list inside of top nav. This is specifically going to target links or A tags that are inside of list items that are part of a UL that are in the top nav div. These are called descendant selectors, if you want to know what the technical name of it is. Now, the first thing that I want to go ahead and do is I want these not to be stacked on top of one another. I want them to be displayed in line like my icons are right here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my code here. And again, we do that with the list items. We want the individual list items to be in line with one another. So I'm going to go ahead and in that style, I'm going to say display inline, just like we did for our social media icons. And I'm going to save that and look in design view, and sure enough, you can now see that my links are being displayed inline. They aren't finished. I still have a lot of formatting to apply to them, but at least we've got them laid out more or less correctly. The next thing that I want to go ahead and do is I want to specify some the border on the top and the bottom. And this border is going to run the full length. I just don't want the border above the individual list items. I want it to run the full length. So that means I'm going to apply the border to the container, not to the list items. And the container in this case is the UL, the unordered list. So let's go ahead now and go into code. And there's the UL inside of the top nav. So I'm going to go ahead and do border dash top. And I want this to be 1 pixel, black, and solid. So I want a 1 pixel wide border. That's a thin border. The color I want to be black, and I want it to be solid. There are other options like dotted or dash that you can use for these border styles. I want the same thing to be on the bottom, so I'm going to do border dash bottom, 1 pixel, black, and solid. We'll save that, and let's take a look and see what that does for us. And sure enough, we have a border on the top and the bottom of these list items here. Now, they're really crunched in here, so I need to go ahead and put some spacing around these items. And also, you're going to see the words are more or less running into one another. I need to space that out as well. So let's go ahead now and go back into our CSS code. Now, before we've talked a lot about margin and how margin gets applied to things. The companion property, CSS property to margin, is padding. Now, margin places spacing on the outside of something. Padding places spacing on the inside of something. So margin is on the outside, spacing is on the inside. I'm sorry, margin is on the outside, padding is on the inside. So let's see how that's going to work. I have my top nav UL style right here. And what I'm going to do is going to click at the very end of this and just hit enter and tab over. And that's going to allow me to get a second line of commands in here. So let's see how those work. I'm going to do margin, colon, and I'm going to say, I'm going to give it something really large, 20 pixels by 0. So that's going to give it 20 pixels top and bottom, 0 left and right. And let's see how that works out. And you can see I now have 20 pixels of spacing below it and 20 pixels of spacing above it. But you can see it's on the outside of the UL. There's no space on the inside, and you can see the border defines where the UL starts and stops. So margin places spacing on the outside, whereas padding is going to put spacing on the inside. So I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to say padding, and this is going to be 10 pixels top and bottom, and 0 left and right. And let's see how that works out. When I come in here to design, there I go. And you can see the spacing on the inside of that. So the rule to remember there, and this is really important, padding goes on the inside of an object, margin gives you spacing on the outside of an object. Now, we also want to go ahead and space these commands out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and, if I look at my original here, we're going to go ahead and give it a little bit of space to the left and quite a bit to the right. So I'm going to go ahead now and come in here to my CSS, and this I want to apply to the actual word itself. The actual word itself. So when I look in the source code here, that's at A tag. So I'm going to come back in here to code and go into my CSS, scroll down, and find my styles. And there's the A inside of a list item, inside of an unordered list in the top nav. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and place my padding for the words. And what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to say padding, and I want to give it a little bit, or zero space top and bottom, and I'm going to say 15 pixels left and right. I'll save that, and we'll go ahead and see the way that looks. And there we go. We can see that these are nicely spaced out. And we're going to format these links as a different color a little bit later. You can see right now they're blue and they've got a red rollover effect on them. We'll change that. Actually, let's go ahead and change that right now. I'm going to come in here to the code and I'm going to specify the colors for my links. Now, if I scroll up here into the text section, the text element section, these are going to be the default colors for your links. And most of us that have visited web pages at one point or another know that a link is normally a particular color. By default, it's that blue color. But once we clicked a link and gone there, if we go back, the link is displayed in a different color. Usually the standard color is that blue, and the visited color, a link that's been clicked on, is that purple color. We also know that we can apply hover effects onto it. This is the color for the link, this is color for a visited link, and this is the color for a rollover effect. And you can see we're using a colon and then the state that the link is in. We can also specify the active state of the link. That's when you're actually pressing down on it. And it's kind of hard to see that. And the focus state of the link. And that's when the link has keyboard focus. Now, these defaults are going to be good for the body of the text, but I want to specify something different for that top nav. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and copy these here. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to my top nav area. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter a couple times to give myself a blank line. And then I'm going to paste those in. And I'm going to go ahead now and copy the word top nav here. Actually, top nav in a space. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in. And what this is telling the browser is format these links if they're in the top nav section like this. So I want the default color for my links not to be a blue, but to be black. And I also want it to be bold. So I'm going to say font weight is going to be bold there. The visited links, I'm going to make the same color because I don't like it when the links change colors just because you've been to them before. And I'm going to do the same thing for the active, but I am going to change the hover color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all that, type a £, and that brings up my color wheel here. And I wanted like an orange color for the rollover. So I'm going to come down here and find an orange and click it. And that will be my color for my links, my hovers on my links. So let's go ahead and go into design view here. And you can see the change. These are now black and they're bold. And when I hover over them, they change into that orange color. And if that bold is a little bit too bright, and you can see here, I actually don't have them bold in the original. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. It's a little bit too stark. So I'll go ahead and save that right like that. And now you can see the way my links are set up here. So we successfully formatted this top navigation section. Now this banner image that's right here looks good. I don't really need to put any formatting on this particular div right here right now. A little bit later on, we're going to go ahead and format this differently when we do this transition effect that has it fade in and out with the drop-down box with the text inside of it. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and leave this banner image alone. The next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and format this content area right here. So I'm going to go ahead and we're also going to format this right-hand sidebar right over here. And you can see we're constraining this content area into a certain space, and we're also constraining the right-hand sidebar into a certain place. We have 900 pixels total to work with here, and this is actually going to take up 200 pixels. I'm going to have 50 pixels of margin in between these two. So we've got 250 minus 900 is going to leave 650 pixels for this area right here. So I'm going to go ahead and come back in here and come back into my code for my CSS. And again, we're going to leave that banner alone for right now. I am going to take out that extra space right there. So now we're back in our CSS, and I've got the right side and I've got the content area right here. If it helps you, you can always drag this up here so they're in the order that they appear. But it won't affect the way the CSS looks at all. So I'm going to go ahead and in my content area, I'm going to say the width here is going to be 650 pixels. And I'm going to say the right-hand sidebar is going to have a width of 200 pixels. So I'll go ahead and save that. Let's see what that does to our design. You can see this has been constrained into that 650 pixels. And you can see this has also been constrained a little bit more into a 200 pixel space. But we want this to always float to the left, and we want this to float to the right. We want this on the right, and we want this on the left. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to apply those float statements in here. So for my content area, I'm going to say float left. And for my right side area, I'm going to say float right. And we'll save that, go into design view, and sure enough, this is floated over to the left, allowing our right-hand sidebar to float over to the right. And then down at the very bottom, you can't even see it right now, we actually have the footer div. And actually, I can't even see where there's where that text is for the footer. You can see that copyright statement right there. So the last thing we need to do as far as positioning, because all the formatting in here is going to be done with the content. So the last thing we need to do as far as positioning go is to get that footer to drop down to the bottom. So now let's go ahead and get that to move. So I'm going to go back into code here and scroll on down, and you'll remember the CSS statement that we use to force things below other things that have been floated is the clear statement. So I'm going to go ahead and say clear both here. And going to go ahead and close that off with a semicolon, save the document, and now you can see that copyright statement has been floated all the way to the bottom, and it's clearing both this left and this right area here. Now, one last thing that I want to do before we begin to format the content that's in this area is I want to actually put some spacing in between my banner image and my two divs down below. So I want to put some margin bottom onto this banner image. So I'm going to come in here to code, and there's my banner div in my CSS, and I'm going to go ahead and say margin dash bottom, and I'm going to put 30 pixels of spacing on the bottom of that. I'll save my file and go into design view, and there we go. We now have some spacing. Everything has been pushed down. And we may want to do the same thing to the footer there. I can go ahead and put some top margin on the footer. I can go ahead and say margin dash top, and I'm going to go ahead and say 20 pixels there. I'll save that, and oops, you know what? We're going to go ahead and do that a little bit later, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. We're going to come back to the footer when we put the border on there. So I'll take that out. Sorry, I ran ahead of what we're doing, because we are going to need some spacing down here. So that's the basics of setting up the positioning of your different elements on your page. And the next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to begin to format the content in here and make it look a little bit more like what we have right here. We're going to format this heading. We're going to format the paragraphs of text. These two images, we're going to get those set up. And then we're going to format this right-hand sidebar area right here to format this H2. Whoops. This latest news is in an H2. These sample news headlines are in H3s. And then we have the dates and the descriptions right there. And we're actually going to do this with a combination of class styles and tag styles. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do in our next video. Thanks for watching.